My name is Beth Dahlman, and I'm with faithfulamerica.org. And we're an online action network reclaiming faith as a force for justice and the common good. And I'm here to introduce our next speaker. Reverend Derek Harkins is the senior pastor over at 19th Street Baptist Church here in DC. And he's also on the board of Faithful America's parent organization, Faith in Public Life. And we just so appreciate his leadership on so many important moral issues, both here in DC, nationally, and issues that affect folks all around the world. So come on up, Reverend Derek Harkins.
I hope everyone is glad to be here today to be standing in solidarity with all of those who are in Copenhagen and in places all over the world. Isn't it an encouraging thing to know that you aren't the only voices, you aren't the only persons who are giving of your time and your commitment to speak to an issue that is at, indeed, as we've already said, at crisis proportions? Doesn't it make you feel good that you're not at home in the warm, in front of your television set? Aren't you glad that you're out on the cold mall on the evening like that? Yeah. All right, okay. Well, let me say a couple of things ever so briefly, and I want to thank Joelle for the wonderful, she actually stole my sermon. I'll have to use it tomorrow in church instead. But what you need to understand this evening is that people of faith, and whatever that measure of faith is, from the most liberal of liberals to indeed the most conservative of conservatives, if they understand what it means to have this creation as a gift from their Creator, there's no person of faith who in good conscience should not see this as the crisis, should not see this as the priority that it is. So I'm here to say to you, don't be dissuaded by those in the faith community who may be of a more conservative political stripe. They do not speak for all of us. As a matter of fact, the last time I read the Bible, and just in case you didn't imagine this, I do it fairly often, I came to the conclusion that God has bestowed on us not only the blessings of creation, but the responsibilities of stewardship. And so you need to also understand, while the international ongoing conversation is taking place in Copenhagen, I believe in not only prayerfulness, but I also believe in human persistence. And I want you all to be encouraged, because you need to understand, as I've already said, that you are, along with millions of others, making a stand for what is right and what is just. And it's a wonderful thing to be able to have a three-point stance when you talk about an idea. And the fact is that when we speak about something coming from Copenhagen that is fair, it reminds me that the God I worship is a God who speaks of things that are just. And fairness and justice, I think, are largely interchangeable terms. And I'd like to think that what we always advocate, what we always hope for, what we always work for, is that which is just for the millions of people who are already, as we've so passionately heard just a moment ago, the millions of people around the globe who are already the victims of the abuse of this blessing that God has bestowed. But along with being fair and being just, we need to understand the prospect of that which comes out of Copenhagen as being indeed ambitious. And what better example than the very building that sits behind me right now to represent the highest expectations and the highest ambitions that we as human beings can strive for. Now, do we always meet those ambitions? No. Do we always meet that mark? No. But that ought to never dissuade us from working, from laboring, from striving. And so I hope and trust that we will not settle for anything that is less than the very best that can come out of the work in Copenhagen, that we will not settle for kowtowing and acquiescing to those interests that do not have the best interest of creation in mind. Yeah. And then finally, we talk about something coming out of Copenhagen that is binding. And I'd like to think, I wouldn't be much of a preacher on Sunday if all that I did was make folk feel good for a few hours. In fact, there wouldn't be any authenticity to what I seek to do. So I would hope that none of us are satisfied with platitudes that may emanate from what comes out of Copenhagen and that evaporate with the next news cycle. We cannot allow for the work, we can't allow for the effort to simply pass away because it does not have the binding measure, it doesn't make the traction, and therefore it doesn't make the difference in the issue of climate change. We need to understand that. We need to not settle for anything less than that which will endure. So let me just say this as I close. You know, we've been talking, you've heard a lot about the ark tonight. And what you need to understand is this, that while in terms of the possibilities and the unfortunate options that come with untended climate lack of control, I should say, an ark sitting on the mall right now might actually become a pretty viable means of transportation if we let climate control go in the direction that it seems to be going, climate change in the direction it seems to be going. But you need to remember this, that and it's been said already, but the ark is ultimately a symbol of hope. The ark is ultimately a symbol of the fact that we as human beings have been given not only the direction, not only the focus, but the tools to make sure that we can make our way on the other side of any crisis. So we are at the brink of a crisis now, make no mistake about that. But your resolve, the work that we will demand that comes out of Copenhagen, and that which will subsist and continue and allow for climate change to indeed be addressed viably, will mean that what we've looked at tonight, what we've evidenced tonight by the presence of this ark, represents the very hope that we have. No, this ark doesn't have to float anywhere for it to be a measure, a vehicle of the purposefulness that I believe that God intended for it to have, as it was talked about in the Old Testament. No, this ark represents the resolve, the combined effort, the combined work of people like yourself in places like this. Maybe not as dramatic as this. Maybe there are candlelight vigils going. You know, I'm talking long enough so that it gets dark enough so that the candles are indeed dramatic when we light them. But in all seriousness,
keep going.
The work that you are a part of, and you're being a part of that work, begins with your resolve. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're on your way to Copenhagen this week. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be the clarion voice that speaks to the leaders directly, but it means you are part of that larger effort. So in the same way that this ark represented the fact that a crisis could be met and indeed overcome, your work and your resolve means the very same thing. So, tell you what I'm going to do on tomorrow morning. I'm going to do all the things that I normally try to do every Sunday in and out. I'm going to try to encourage the people that gather at the 19th Street Baptist Church. I'm going to try to do all of those things that honor the God I seek to serve. But I'm also going to remember that the only way that indeed those things that need to happen that are meaningful and impactful when it comes to human endeavor, they only happen because we put our will and our effort toward them. So my prayers are going to be accompanied by whatever actions I can be a part of, so that the work that comes out of Copenhagen is fair, the work that comes out of Copenhagen is ambitious, and the work that comes out of Copenhagen is binding. Because I know a God who is fair and just, who has ambitious purpose and plans for the people that God has created, and whose trust and love and covenant promise is forever binding. So indeed, may the God of creation bless you and keep you. Amen.